Welcome to the Delta Podcast. I'm your host, Coach Coale. This is the show where we dive into the relationship between leadership and change, what it means for individuals, teams, and organizations looking to thrive. Today's a great day to be coachable, so let's jump in. Hello, Jean. Welcome to the Delta.
Thank you, Kevin. I'm glad to be here.
It's great to be with you. How have you been?
Today I've been feeling really strong and good. Yeah. Thanks for asking. How about you?
I am doing well. Hello from North Carolina.
Yes. And right back at you from Brooklyn.
There you go. Well, so that's around the part of the world where you and I first connected. Mm-hmm. You may remember that we linked up after a Vienna Tang show. And part of that show included you going up on the stage and playing a song with her. And I'm a huge fan of her work. I was blown away by the song that you played. And so we had a chance to connect after the show, and that's how we first met. So I'm thrilled to have this conversation with you. You know, on the Delta, we do things, well, let me give you a backdrop here. We talk about the relationship between leadership and change, what it means for individuals, teams, and organizations to shift, to optimize, to do things a little bit differently. As a host of this, my goal really is to interview people that inspire me and create a platform to help make those individuals heroic. So that is the sort of framework, and we use three questions to kick off the conversation. For what do you want to talk about? Why should we talk about this now? And what should we aim for in this conversation? So in a second, I'm going to get to that. I'm going to ask you those questions. But again, for those listening that don't know you, I want to share a little bit about who you are. How does that sound?
That sounds great.
Okay, great. So Jean Rohe, according to No Depression, so this is a quote. I think that beautifully describes your work. Not only does she make astoundingly beautiful music, but she is thoughtful, reflective, and courageous. So I'm curious, what does that mean to you?
I love that quote. I love thinking of myself as courageous, because I know I am in my best moments. That's a quality that's important to me. And yeah, and I appreciate that reviewer thinking of my work as thoughtful and reflective as well. I think some of my aims as an artist are to scratch below the simple surface of the truth, and really get into the nuance of a situation in my writing as much as I can. So yes, that's a very kind description, and I think accurate in describing the strongest parts of what I hope to do.
Yeah, the aspirations. And it sounds like what you've been able to achieve from this person's perspective. So I want to go on here. Jean Rohe writes one-of-a-kind narrative songs. I've certainly experienced that listening to your stuff. Concerned as much with the interior lives of her narrators as with the sociopolitical forces that shape them. In 2023, she released Into the Night with her duo Robinson Rohe on DiFranco's Righteous Babe Records. With support from the Brooklyn Arts Council, she debuted her performance memoir, 74 Corridor, a full band project that follows her father's life story via the New Jersey Transit number 74 bus, where he lived and died. Jean won the 2022 Kerrville Folk Festival New Folk Songwriting Contest with her deeply personal and timely song, Animal. And as you said earlier, you live in Brooklyn. So it's just a skim of the surface in terms of who you are and what you do. What did I leave out? What's important for folks listening to know about you?
Oh, man. I don't know. Bios for artists are such silly things. It's
Mm,
like I read
what do you
my
mean?
friends. Well, I read my friends' descriptions of who they are as an artist, and it's not that anything in there isn't true, but um, a human being has many
Yeah.
facets, and it's hard to know what to pick to put in those 3 sentence descriptors. Um, but I don't know. I love to cook and be outside, and I'm really curious about people. That's, I think, in the simplest terms, what motivates my work.
Yeah. Cook, outside, and people. Those are three great interests. I would imagine too, especially if they're all aligned.
It's sort of, I mean, those are basic survival, like elements of one's basic survival, right? Food, the nature and community,
Yeah.
humanity.
Yeah. Three pretty good ingredients for happiness. My best days usually include something like that.
Mm,
Um, but I find it hard to make sure that those things show up or exist in the way that I would like them to. Um,
it's easy for that stuff, the most important stuff, to fall between the cracks, isn't
yeah.
it?
Yes, that's certainly been my case, or my experience.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to jump into the questions. I have no idea what you want to talk about, so I'm excited to kick off with the first question here, Gene. What would you like to talk about with the time that you and I got?
Yeah. So at first I thought, oh, maybe we should open up a question about like what's the role of the artist in a time of like climate change and deep injustice and the rise of authoritarian governments. Because that's a question that a lot of people are in my communities are asking right now. Like, does it mean anything to be
Mm,
making music or writing plays or whatever? But when I thought about it a little more, the big thing on the horizon for me in my life right now is that I'm gonna have a baby in a couple
mm,
months, and it'll be my first child. It feels super surreal. And so I have been, I think it didn't really coalesce for me until I started thinking about this question. But a lot of what's been going through my mind is like, how do I ask for help? And how do I get to a place where I feel comfortable stepping back from the wide world and putting on a narrower focus,
mm,
to be a parent and really appreciate that project. Um,
mm.
so I don't know. Maybe you can help me bring a little bit more clarity to that uh, question. But I think that's basically it. Like, what is it? What is it? I'll just, if I can speak for another second, I've been thinking about the nesting impulse that
Yeah.
people describe being part of, like, the runway to launching a new life into the world. Um, and I haven't been finding myself like wanting to like put together baby furniture or like things like that so much. Um, but I have been noticing that manifesting in my life in a desire to kind of think about what are kind of pause points for my various musical projects, some of
Mm,
which you talked about in your description of my work. And yeah, and how do I make sure that I can lean on other people as a real type A kind of like I'm going to do it person? How do I lean on other people to kind of like hold space for that for me so that I can come back to it? A changed person, I'm sure,
mm.
in the wake of the birth of my kid.
Yeah. Okay, let me play it back to you to make sure I'm following. So I like what you said at the jump about like anticipating certain bigger things in terms of the macro and what's going on in the world. We could talk about that. But what you're feeling in this moment is you're being drawn more towards the thing that you're the project, as you put it, of parenting. So maybe focus more on that, the latter piece there.
Yeah, although I think they're really connected, right? Like that the micro and the macro are related to each other, and they can't always, our eyes can't always focus at the distance and the, the near, what is it called? The close stuff and the distant stuff. We can't take in the full vista and read the book at the same time. Not entirely. And so I know that like my job is going to have to be to look at the small thing at a time when it seems like the world is demanding my attention. I think it's going to require some trust to make that happen. Yeah. But that's great. The micro and the macro. We'll use that. I know.
I like the way that you phrase that. Like, how do I focus on the small thing when it feels like the world is demanding my focus?
Yeah. I think that's closer to what I'm asking. Yeah.
That's great. That's great. Okay. So of all the things that we could talk about, why should we talk about this today?
Well, I think I said some of it. It feels like these are the two kind of pressing bits in my life and in the life of my communities. Certainly anticipating my first child in this real like transformation of like my role as a human being thus far. Certainly front of mind for me. And then also, how do we respond to a government that appears to be moving in the direction of just a real base level of inhumanity, and come together and care for each other from all of our different corners that we occupy. Those feel like the most immediate things, and they don't seem immediately compatible with one another at first glance.
I got you. Okay, so question number 3, what should we aim for in this conversation? Or I guess put differently, like what would success look like if we talk about this thing with the time that we got?
Yeah, that's great. I'll say I'm a pretty like goals averse person, which can be sometimes an asset in my life. And sometimes I see that it is the opposite of that. But I think, in some way I really appreciate the long process and thinking that like, this conversation is just one of many little beads in the necklace of, an ongoing dialogue with other people that you and I will encounter, and that maybe some of our listeners will encounter too. So I guess it feels like it would be successful today if we can, I don't know, just open up these topics a little bit. It feels less important to me like that I come away with some big insight that is going to explode my mind in the next half hour, than that there's just some like grain of conversation that I can maybe like carry along into the next bead of the necklace, wherever I find that, if that makes sense.
It does make sense. I mean, you've mentioned, so in this conversation already, a couple of metaphors.
Forgive me, I'm a songwriter. What can I say?
Yeah, but I have to say, listening, your metaphors are on another level. When I listen to your music, I can't even tell, is it a metaphor? Is this real? Like there's a lot of depth and layers there. And so I really like your edit of this conversation is just a bead.
Is that allowed? Is that okay on the Delta? For this conversation to be a bead.
This conversation can be a bead.
Good.
And you've got me thinking about it in a new way. Like we're just sort of stringing this together, conversation at a time, day at a time, week at a time, or whatever. I mean, in my work as a coach, this question number 3 comes from like a good coaching conversation. This is not a coaching conversation, but a good one. We end someplace different than where we began.
That's beautiful.
And so, but now you've got me thinking about like the bead, and ending someplace different than where we began can look something simply as something like just adding another bead to the strand and seeing what accumulates over time. So I appreciate that. Addition of the metaphor, keep them coming.
Yeah. No, that's good. That's great. I think we'll definitely land someplace different than where we started. I feel that shifting already.
Yeah. I have a question in mind, but is there a specific place you would like to begin?
I'm curious to hear what you want to know now that you've heard from me a little bit.
Yeah. Well, I'm curious about, you mentioned earlier, the importance of people in that equation for you. And that's what comes up for me when you're talking about the micro and the macro, like this, all of the people around you and the relationships that you have and the impact that they're feeling politically, from the climate, all sorts of things. Meanwhile, you've got like a person growing on the inside. So I'm wondering if you could just say more about like what being with people, connecting with people, having a relationship with people, what does that mean to you?
Well, first I'll just reflect. I'm not sure why, but I'm finding myself feeling a little bit choked up already, and I can't quite like articulate why that is. But it's not a sad feeling. I think I'm just feeling a lot of gratitude. I think I came up in a family where a lot of focus and emphasis was placed on our individual roles or our individual places in the group. Not to the extent of like downplaying the importance of my individuality, but I think my family upbringing was very much about the importance of community, and I've had different relationships to that at different points in time, but I feel really grateful that is just so deeply ingrained in me right now, and I think that my family had a really big part in that. I'm in some ways an introvert. I mean, I require a lot of time alone to make the work that I make, to write my songs. Obviously artists work in so many different ways, but that is a really important mode to me. And so to have some like contrast for that, some counterweight to all that alone time in like real life human connection is so important. And as you said, now I'm having this real life human connection with a human that is bizarrely inside my body. So weird. I still haven't quite come to feel like this is just like not a sci-fi experience I'm having. And to really understand, like, wow, as I'm getting into these days where it's harder to like tie my own shoes, how important it is to have other people around me who are like helping to just even just be a reality check for me, like, yes, this is happening and I'm with you. For the good, the bad, and the ugly of it all. Yeah. Did that kind of get at the heart of that?
It does. Let me So I want to ask you about the family culture piece, though. You said you grew up in a family where it was like we understood that we were part of a group.
Yeah, I think
Take me into that.
so.
Like, say more. How did that look when you were a kid?
Mm. Um, well, I have the impression that my parents always had time for us. Not that they were like entertaining us at every moment, but I think that both my mom and dad really like valued. Well, my father was unemployed and underemployed in my earliest days. My mom was a nurse. My dad was an incredible children's musician and and just musician and I don't know, very special person. Um, but they were around for us. Our neighbors were around for us.
Mm,
We didn't belong to like a lot of like traditional structured communities, like a church or like synagogue or something like that. But there was a folk music community that my parents were part of that really it was that kind of like people from that community of folks who played music and appreciated music, put on concerts and dances, had parties. That was my part of my extended family, so to speak. And um, and I really felt like I had like a role and a place in that, especially as a person who, from a young age, was very musically inclined, and um, to have adults there who were like, "Yeah, come sing a song."
mm,
I think that way of connecting with people just felt really natural. I mean, as I've grown, I've had to find my own ways that makes sense in my life as I've evolved and changed. Um, but yeah, I wouldn't trade that.
mm.
And But I do think it really just like comes down to time and attention. It's such a it's such an incredible resource to have and share.
I appreciate what you said there about like I had the impression that my folks were there for me,
Hmm.
like they were able to show up.
Yeah. I'm sure they had their own feelings about how well they did, in the way that all human beings like have their doubts. And, I can say like my parents are human beings. They were not perfect, of course, but the way that I feel about it, they were around. Um I don't have the sense that like that some people have is like dad's always at work or
Yeah,
um and the culture of like family care. Like, I mean, when I picture my dad like coming home from school and he's like making dinner, there's just that's where I get my love of food preparation and
yeah.
eating. It's a really important part of the of family life, and togetherness too. Um, so just like being all of that, like the labor, the labor of love being on display as well.
Mm.
Um, yeah.
That's the stuff that matters in 20 years.
Ain't it the truth? I mean, I'm reflecting on that a lot more now that I'm, thinking about like what's going to stick with this creature that's about to emerge into the world.
Yeah.
Hmm.
I think I may have shared I have a daughter. She's 5. Um, and so that's what's coming up for me as you're talking. And and just thinking about like reflecting over the course of this conversation on the last 5 years and how
Yeah.
much in my own life has shifted, how much has changed.
Hmm.
Um, in my work as a coach, I think feedback's important. It's a hard thing to get right. It takes cultivation and effort and consistency and all of that. And so the other day, Well, one of the things that I'll do with people that I'm working with, I'll have them bring out their phone and I'll say, I want you to connect with somebody that you care about. Like picture somebody in your contacts list that you admire. Go ahead and text them now and ask what you can do to be a better fill in the blank. Husband, wife, friend, partner, parent, colleague. And it's a amazing exercise because what people get back is all sorts of like pretty profound stuff. But I did this the other day with my daughter. I asked her, what can I do to be a better dad?
Mm.
And
Wow.
and she said, she took a beat and she said, I want more hugs and I want to build more forts. Those are things I can do. There's a lot of stuff that I can't do. Those are things I can do. But
That's
you've got
great.
I just think like that's the stuff that really is so important. But there's a lot of noise around it, especially when you're bringing a little person into the world. There's a lot of noise. But that's the stuff that we're talking about. To me, it feels like that's what really is most meaningful.
You know what I love about that story you just told is that it's like it says so much about your relationship with your daughter and the kind of parenting that you've done and who she just must be as a person, that she has that level of reflection available to her, to say like, okay, here's this person, whatever parents are at that point in your life, sort of something like a god, and to say, I need hugs and forts.
Yeah.
I think that's just so great.
Right. Right.
How cool of you to ask.
Well, I need to ask more often.
Mm.
But she, yes, I'm very lucky to be her parent in this journey. I'm curious as we're talking through this, like this is unfolding in real time. Is anything shifting for you, or is anything come up that you want to go back to?
Um, well, I like that. I appreciate that you're sharing some things about your own parental journey, and that story is great. I feel like the emergence of verbal skills will be a game changer for my relationship with this person. Um, yeah, no, I think this is really like a good foundational frame to think about, like, what is the soil from which I sprang,
Hmm.
and how is that like guiding my values in parenthood and in community.
Hmm.
Yeah.
What type of parent do you want to be?
Well, I guess having said what I just said about my own parents, I must answer that I want to be a parent who is around, who is present. um, I think some of my fears. This is not what you asked, but I will hopefully make this connection. I think some of my fears around parenthood are that I I know that there is some of what I can see is that there is loss that is involved in becoming a parent, of course, as well as so much to be
Hmm.
gained. And I guess I feel concerned about. I want to find ways to not lose track of myself completely. I'm willing. I'm already like humbled in this physical experience by the ways that my immediate needs are intertwined with that of another being
Hmm.
already. Um, and I'm up for that, but I would like to avoid losing touch with myself and my other creative powers that have been such a strong part of my identity um, through my life. And so I guess in thinking about what kind of parent I want to be, I want to also like be able to model to my child, in appropriate ways, like what it's like to have an artistic life that, includes them in some parts of that circle, and also, has some boundaries,
Hmm.
like that there's space to be an individual. And then to my like original question, also to like welcome the whole world into that, the processing of creative ideas, to be responsive to the wide vista, as well as the tight focus. Um, yeah, I mean, it's fascinating. I've done, as you were saying in the intro, I created this piece about my dad that I'm still, continuing to work on and don't want to lose sight of. And I'm
Hmm.
curious how that's going to change after my own experience of parenthood. Um, in the past, I also wrote a song cycle about my dad's mother, my grandmother, for whom I was named. And in writing these pieces and talking with other folks who've done a lot of sort of creative memoir style writing in their own theatrical work or music or whatever, um, I've come to think a lot about the ways that, like, many of us long to know our parents
Hmm.
to a degree that is never
Hmm.
attainable. I mean, even in the closest relationships. And so it's very interesting to start imagining what it is like to be observed in that way. Like I
Yeah.
have been observed as a child of my own parents.
Yeah.
What will it be like to be observing my own child, and for them to, be forming their own idea of like who I am, and how wide is the gulf between what they want to know and what they do know. Or maybe their brain will work really differently than mine, and this will not register as an issue for them. That is also possible. We won't know.
Yeah.
um, yeah.
Well, knowing one another,
Yeah.
and how challenging or maybe even impossible it is to do that, uh, to know somebody as well as they know themselves, or um, because I mean, as you were talking, I'm thinking like in the other direction. Like I've got this little 5-year-old that's running around. I'm like, what is it like to be in that little brain
Mm-hmm.
over the course of the day?
Mm-hmm.
And she's probably thinking like, what on earth is that guy thinking simultaneously? And so you talked about community. It's like the importance of connection, but the extent, like there is a limitation there.
Mm-hmm.
That as much as we're connected, there's still going to be some mystery in it.
Yes. I mean, it's true with any other person, right? Even, yeah, our dear friends, or,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well,
I mean,
especially
I'm
our dear
very
friends
drawn
that
to
are.
that.
Go ahead.
Yeah. No, I'm very interested in that longing to know and never quite achieving the depth of understanding, or knowing, even in the times that I feel like I really get this other person, that on some level I can't ever be entirely sure of that. I mean, there's all kinds of communication practices that we have to help us get closer to that, and those things are great. But there's I mean, I think, just to interject, I think there's just so many places where art is very useful for that, like the like language and description can do so much, can get us so far. And then there's this place beyond words that is really any kind of art form. Music has this layer of abstraction that is like really at the heart of it. Even in a song with lyrics, for some of us, the words hit us first, but this feeling of the music can be so powerful and really transcend anything intellectual, and go right to some kind of like animal core of us. And I think that that's well, maybe I'm like maybe I'm learning something now about like the power that music has to just kind of like sync up vibrations on a different level, and that might be enough.
Yeah. How does that show up or play out in your life as an artist?
um this like this animal level of art connection, is that what you
Yeah,
mean?
and I was thinking like of music as a way of communicating something, a feeling, an idea,
Yeah.
to somebody else those other people may receive it or experience it differently.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I'm thinking about two people listening to the same song having a different experience, but it's the same. Nothing has changed about the song.
Yeah.
Same lyrics, same melody.
Yeah.
So, how do you, as an artist, as somebody who's creating, like, what role does music play? Here's a better question: what role does music play in your life as a way of communicating something?
Yeah. Um, that's I think it starts with my own communication internally first.
Hmm.
I don't, at least at the inception of something, I'm not thinking about the recipient so directly. Or when I do, I don't always have like the best, I'm not making my best stuff. Sometimes
Hang
I
on a
have
second. What do you mean by that?
assignments. Well, I've like tried to write songs that do a certain thing, like fill a role at a person's wedding, or are the perfect sing along to open up this event that I'm,
Yeah.
participating in. And sometimes that works out great, but sometimes those kinds of like on assignment songs
Yeah.
just feel like
They're on assignment.
they're on assignment. And I think this is like what I was saying about just being a little bit goal averse. I think sometimes like too much of a focus on a really clear and specific goal, it's important always at some stage, otherwise things don't get done. But on another level, they can create like too narrow a channel for
Yes.
the fullness of an idea to emerge, I find. Um, so, for me, I think a lot of times when I'm writing a song, I'm like actually trying to work out how I'm thinking about something. I don't know that when I start to write. And I think there's
Huh.
like I said, the lyric layer of things, the words are incredibly important to me, and I labor over them to no end, and really scrutinize that part of things. But the music layer of things, I think, is often like the emotional key, because I'm often writing music and lyrics at the same time. I'm kind of making stuff up off the top of my head and then going in later. And it's almost like I always think about making a jigsaw puzzle where you put the border together and you're like, okay, now I have an idea of the shape of this thing. Um, Actually, maybe that's a terrible metaphor because the jigsaw puzzle goes together in one way. Song could go
Mm.
together a lot of different ways, but there's a stage of like figuring out what is the puzzle, and then the stage of solving the puzzle. And
Hmm.
I find myself, often at the outset, kind of like fumbling for like what even is the question at the heart of this, and the musical improvisation can sometimes draw from a deeper well that I am not aware of until it starts to surface. I don't know. The writing process is very mysterious. Sometimes I write a song and I'm someone will ask, like, how did you write that? And I can't quite retrace my steps. There's like a period of entrancement that is just lost,
Hmm.
to me. Um, but I don't know. I find that aspect of things really connecting. I was recently I was recently in Brazil. I was recently in Rio for a little while, and I had been there about 15 years ago, and I went back, and you know, there's something about, and I don't want to like paint with too broad a brush, but I think it's safe to say that in a really general way that people who are going to little concerts and little jam sessions and big samba rehearsals and just experiencing music together publicly, there's a level of musical engagement that feels very familiar to me from my childhood upbringing in this folk music community.
Hmm.
Um, and I'm just, even though the music itself is, quite different, and it shares in common this like invitation to um, embody and participate in a way that I don't feel like I always find. Like I'm really lucky to live in New York City and go out to hear a lot of live music. Um, and, you know, the degree to which people feel like invited to sing and move and be in music. Um, it just has like an entitlement of being a
Hmm.
human being. Um, uh, I'm bringing it up now to say that I think that level of like embodied connection with music that is possible through singing together, through moving together, through like experiencing something simultaneously, even if, as you said, two people really get different things from the same piece of music, the same song, the same artwork, the same play. Um, the collective experience of doing that together, and I would say probably also in real time, like the live experience of that. um I think there's something very powerful and connecting about that, and I don't think it's always necessarily for a greater good,
Hmm.
like a Nazi rally in the 30s produces a feeling of unity too,
Hmm.
for the people who feel included there. Um, but I think at its best, at its highest, like that experience of art, um, like elevates us because it allows us to do something together and also um, have our own separate interpretations and experience of what that means. And that's, yeah, I mean, maybe this is the first time I'm really saying it like that, but that feels like a very human, special human quality, to be both in our own space and together.
Yeah.
Um, God, that's my ideal society, I think.
The ability to be in our own space and together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. To have our own individual experience and not feel completely alone
Hmm.
in that. Uh, that feels like I have to think about it more, but I think that hits a nail on the head for me in some way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What struck you in what you just shared? Like, what's sticking with you?
Mm, just now.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I am I think I'm just like remembering um how uh how much our like collective experience and our individual experiences are intertwined, and that you know we can't really have one without the other. um, I think that maybe some of the feelings of loneliness and isolation that so many of us experience, that's part of the human condition, but in a sustained way, that's not a healthy part of the human condition. Um, and when it comes in a sustained way, it's also not truly like truly our individual internal experience. I think we're not feeling connected to the world.
Hmm.
I do work with a group of artists who um, do music programming in prison with folks who've been incarcerated for a long time, and that the incredible composers, musicians, um, who are living behind bars, some of them for a really long time, and some of them have been part of our community for a long time. And to me, like the achievement of the like individual music practice in that environment and connection with other participants in the program and artists and a sense of meaning in a wider world, like that is, it seems like one of the most challenging environments to find that
Hmm.
balance. Um, but I think people, my observation has been that people are getting a deeper sense of themselves as individuals because they're feeling more connected to the collective through
Hmm.
music.
Hmm.
Um, and uh, yeah, I don't know. That feels relevant to this conversation too. That's powerful. And as I think for myself, I'm not at all trying to compare um, early parenthood of an infant at all to being incarcerated, but the sense of isolation that I've heard some new parents describe, um, it's just making me wonder. Like, are there some lessons to be learned about understanding that that more secluded time as an opportunity to get to know myself and feel myself in the collective of other people who have also been or who are parents,
Hmm.
um, or nurturers, carers in some form, um, because so many of us assume those roles at some point in
Yeah.
our lives.
I imagine that point. Um, a lot of folks listening would appreciate that. Just to call out on isolation, because it can be hard. Well, if you're isolated, it'd be hard to know whether this is something I'm experiencing on my own, other people are experiencing or not, and in what ways can I bridge or rebridge connection.
Mm-hmm.
And I like your point about music as a method for maybe hot wiring some of those connections that are harder.
Yeah. Yeah, and our imaginations too. I think you're making me realize, as you're speaking, like our imaginations are so powerful for answering that question of like, am I doing this? Am I all alone? Am I,
Yeah.
we could imagine all kinds of things that are like more empowering or more disempowering in those moments of deep isolation. And that has an effect on our experience for sure, too.
I used to teach before I got into coaching, and we would talk about books as things that are meant to be read in conversation.
Mm.
Um, and I've certainly experienced, like, one of the practices that I had as a teacher is, we would discuss a book, we'd get around a table. This is very difficult or not possible to do in classes that are big, but if you have a small class, 10, 12 people, and you're reading a text, or you're reading texts and they're like naturally sort of, there's tension there between the text. It's really great to read it in conversation with other people because you get other people's perspectives. Like back to what we were talking about, like
totally.
the sort of concert that brought us together is like, I'm there listening to Vienna Tang, having my experience. You're there, your experience, we connect. There are hundreds of other people in that space having their own individual experiences. But that music is best experienced in community with one another. This conversation is making me think that what you're saying is helping clarify that for me.
Yeah, that's great. And I love that you brought books into it because I love to read, and that does
I can see a few behind you.
Yeah. I'm a big library person, actually, so that I'm not also getting into like deep book storage and alphabetization and stuff. I can just give them back so other people can read them too. But that often feels like such a lone experience. And but what you're saying about reading like books or something we experience together is really that's really so real and true, and that like any kind of art experience we can do around community, and understand that there will be places where we are connecting in a new way and places where we're really having our own individual experience of that.
This conversation has been fantastic so far. What have we not talked about that you would like to discuss?
Okay, let me think for a second. I feel like we went a lot of places I didn't expect to go. But I guess just, coming back to this moment in human society, and feeling like I need to be out on the battlefield in some way. It's starting to kind of coalesce for me that something I know is that like time is long, and like we said, we're stringing one more bead onto this thread, and maybe other people are also putting their beads on this thread. There are going to be ideas and events that we can't anticipate that are like enriching the experience of our lives and adding context. And I'm feeling like, maybe this experience of parenthood that feels like a new chapter coming and some kind of a pause is also going to give me some tools that I don't have now that are maybe applicable to, my work as an artist who's concerned about justice and community care and well-being for everybody in the world. The song that I played with Vienna when you heard us is called "What Will We Tell Our Children?" And I wrote that a long time ago, and actually it's had a couple of iterations as my writing has changed and times have changed. But really to think about like, wow, I didn't have a child or the prospect of a child when I wrote that, but I was really thinking about these collective responsibilities to the next generations that are not here yet, and on and on. Did you choose the struggle or the easy prize? Did we organize? Did we find our power in the man of the hour or the gifts we have inside? I guess it's making me think now too that like sometimes my own writing teaches me something new as time goes by, that like my older self has wisdom that it wasn't even aware of for current me, and that there might be something nourishing there too, maybe for a future bead.
Yeah. When did you write that song?
I wrote a very different first version of that song when I was really young, like probably in 20 like 2009 or something like that.
Wow.
And then wrote a completely different version of it in 2016, 2017. Yeah. Similar concern, but very different like language and approach, I guess, from one version to the next.
Yeah.
Yeah, that song's on a record called Sisterly that came out at the end of 2018.
So how do you know when a song is ready?
Sometimes you don't. Sometimes, well, I'll say sometimes I don't. Sometimes I just say, let's try this. Let's
Yeah.
show this to some people and see how that feels. Um, and then maybe I feel more certain about it. I don't know. That's a really good question. That's a really good question. I think it is important to finish your songs, like on some spiritual, energetic level that I can't
Yeah.
quite defend.
But some sort of punctuation.
Some punctuation. Otherwise, the energy gets kind of stagnant, and that impedes further creations for me. Yeah.
Yeah. I get to support a number of folks in tech, and what you're describing, a different field, but is relevant.
I believe it.
Because people are working hard on something that's very deeply personal to them, that doesn't yet exist in the world, that they've imagined. And then to know when's time for me to put this thing out there and see what people think. That's a hard thing. I would
Yeah.
imagine you might feel some way about the song that you've created, and then you get feedback.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it must be harder for tech people too, because it actually is important what other people, it's important for enough people to like it or to want to use whatever the thing is,
Yeah.
in a way that, of course, it feels great when people resonate with my songs, but I often expect people to not care or not like it. And that can't be too important to me. Um, I mean, I know that I've decided that it needs to like meet my needs first and foremost. So I like hats off to people who are trying to make things that are both like incredibly imaginative and creative and practically useful or interesting to other people at scale.
It's hard.
Yeah.
Pretty straightforward, but difficult.
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
How are we doing in terms of what you wanted to talk about?
I think we're doing great. I feel like I learned some stuff. I heard myself say some things today that I didn't expect. I really appreciate you opening up this like very broad channel for me to walk in, and just like being reflective and asking some good questions along the way. Yeah.
I want to ask you about takeaways. I like to end with any, if you have some, like any learnings, any takeaways.
Yeah. Um well, I'll just say I've in my body right now I feel a sense of like steadiness, and like I'm okay. I'm gonna be okay, and uh, and we're gonna be okay in ways that I cannot foresee. I'm not sure how that's going to happen, but I think I'm feeling some maybe part of what I'm tapped into is like I'm feeling some clarity about, you know, the importance for me to be focused on this new project of parenthood, and to trust that it can enrich my life and my ability to be human in other ways as well. Mm-hmm.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. Did you come away with anything from this
Yeah,
conversation, or?
a lot. You've got me thinking. Yeah, the wheels are turning.
Mm-hmm.
I guess, I mean, some of the things that are coming up for me is just the creative process and what you shared around that. And I love the point about, like, sometimes I write a song to better understand something myself.
Mm-hmm.
And then if it's like, if I produce something that helps somebody else understand something better about the thing that they're going through, that's great. But like, it is primarily first an internal process.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's like creating for yourself versus creating for other people. I think that was a moment for me.
Mm.
And then just reflecting on, like, as you were sharing your journey into parenthood and that project, I love that description of that, because it's work. It's work. And I think in a lot of like spaces in my life, I sort of enjoy collapsing the duality and being like, well, it's not really this or that. Like, for me, becoming a parent is like a pretty binary thing that I've experienced.
Mm.
My partner and I, before we had our kid, we were having dinner with some friends, and they were like, because we knew we were having a girl, they were like, what do you imagine what she's like? Like, do you have any sense of kind of who she's going to be? And we were like, we don't have a clue. Absolutely not. Like, we have no idea. Then she arrives, our daughter, and we're like, oh, we totally get it now. We felt like we crossed
Wow.
over. And we can't imagine her being anyone other than who she is, fully formed, plopped into this world.
Oh, that's amazing.
So I guess I'll wrap and punctuate my own thoughts with this. Like, I think I'm putting together ideas, synthesizing ideas towards the end of our conversation. Like, maybe I'm thinking about my own daughter and kind of living in all of the uncertainty that we're living in the moment. What will we tell our children? Like, it will be okay.
Mm-hmm.
It will be okay. I don't know exactly what that's going to look like. But I love what you just shared towards the end, coming from that steadiness of like, it's going to be okay. I'm not exactly sure how that will play out.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That it will be
Yeah.
okay.
And I think if we can tell our children that we like try, that we were there, that we showed up, and we showed courage and care. I mean, I just want to be able to stand behind the things I do and say in my life, and having that tiny observer right there really puts the heat on.
That tiny observer is going to call you out on some stuff.
Yeah, they better, man. They better. I'm here for the wisdom of the youth.
Yeah. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Jean, thank you so much for sharing your time and your wisdom in this conversation.
Oh. That's so kind. I appreciate having a chance to bounce some ideas around with you.
How can folks follow you? How can folks listen to your work and check out what you're building?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I'm easy to find at jeanrohe.com, and there's a lot of stuff to check out there. If your interest is piqued about the kind of work that I'm making. Also, I'd encourage folks to check out my subscriber page on my website. Every month I post new music, that I've been working on. I think the most recent thing was some video from a string quartet recording session for my new album. And also, folks have free access to download any music from my catalog thus far. And so it's a subscription it's name your price, and at whatever level you want to contribute. That's really helpful. Also, you can listen to my music on all the streaming platforms, buy it on Bandcamp, and find me on social media. And it's easy to connect with me in all those places. I'd love to hear from you.
Awesome. Jean Rohe, thank you for your time, and folks listening, thank you for listening.